Well, hello, and welcome to the Science 114 Midterm Review. And I'm going to make this available this evening, but I'm hoping you guys listen to it and then use the time for normal class time productively to get yourself ready for what I'm going to make available on Wednesday, which will be the actual midterm itself. So what I'd like to do is spend a few minutes, not many, thinking about how to prepare for what you need to be able to think about. And that's what this midterm and your final exam are going to assess. We have covered, my heavens, it has to be at least, let's see, go chapters 1 through 4 in depth. Where'd the 4 go? 4 go in depth, right? And then we did a bit of 5, right? And then we did a fair amount of light, L-I-G-H-T, okay? And all of these things are going to be important, and they have been important throughout everything else we've done inside this class. When we think about what we've actually done inside the lab, what we've actually thought about when we're thinking about, say, the Martian, okay, as well as hidden figures, okay, and think about, how that is all, sort of played into the content of this class so far, okay? So let's get rid of that. Over here. The first thing I need you to think about when you're getting ready for the midterm is your lab book, okay? And I need you to understand this. I've been rethinking the midterm only because of COVID-19. Okay, and normally this would be a 5-hour exam. This year I'm going to give you from Wednesday till Monday to get it done. You'll be submitting it online. I'll be submitting it, or giving it to you online. You'll be submitting your response to me online, which means I have to figure out a way to make sure that you can actually answer these questions in a manner that means you're going to go out and do a little bit of digging around, use your lab book as well as the textbook, as well as materials you're going to find online, okay, to help you actually address these questions. But let's spend some time thinking about first, the first 3 weeks of lab, okay? What did you actually do the first 3 weeks of the lab? Well, the first 3 weeks of the lab was to answer a question, right? How do you actually use characteristics of a question to actually get an answer, okay? And ANS. And the answer, of course, is what was the volume of the hallway? Volume of the hallway. And that's what I'm going to be looking for in your midterm exam. What value did you come up with? Okay? And how did you go about that? And what were the different tools we used? Each of the different labs, that was 3 weeks. And the first week we made some mistakes. The second week things got better. The third week we used different tools. And now you guys have a little bit more confidence in what it is you've actually done. Okay? At the end of the day, though, I'm not looking for a retelling of what you did. I'm going to hopefully be able to see that you've been able to put a little bit of thought into what the answer is for the volume of the hallway. The second is going to be the second lab, examine the relationship between the fundamental laws, namely, if you are working against gravity, how much energy is needed to work within those laws. I mean, there's no escaping this, right? So even at its most simplistic, you realize that when you were walking up and down the stairs, you were walking up a tool or a machine, and that machine was a wedge, and each one of these little stairs represents a sub-wedge, and each of these things can then be figured out as the amount of force, okay, is mass times acceleration, and everything in life can be brought down to this basic equation. Now, obviously we had some permutations of these, like how it was you had mass times g times h to give us some amount of work, right? But you want to think about, if I'm asking a specific type of question, how then did we convert between the observations, okay, to then figure out, say, maybe how many watts of energy were actually expended, or how much in the way of horsepower was actually utilized. These are all important things to think about, because remember, those fundamental laws are immutable. You cannot change them. However, energy is neither created nor destroyed, so therefore it can be transformed. And if we can figure out how it's being transformed, you can communicate how that's being transformed. And that's what I'm going to be looking for with those sets of questions. Okay? Let's get rid of that stuff. Let's go over here. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to think to ourselves, if this is the case, how is it that instead of, say for the second lab, instead of pooling across data sets, and if you've already done that, I noticed there were some of you who worked really diligently to make sure everybody had their sets of data. If you have them, I'll have types of questions that could be answered using that pooled data, but you can also look at the single amount of effort when you're looking at explaining the actual design and what would make the experiment better if we were trying to demonstrate those transitions between energy states. Okay? We're also looking to see how you actually explain how tools function and where errors may have crept in, and possibly, let's imagine, if you were designing these experiments, what could we use as controls? Because at the end of the day, hopefully by the time we finish the first half of this class, you're thinking about what does it mean to design an experiment. Definitely in the final exam, I have you guys design experiments to look for what life is, right? And you can imagine, I can come up with some pretty interesting questions that could say, hey, you've discovered this material on planet X. What would you actually do to experimentally demonstrate that it is alive? Okay. So, how can I make sure everybody's doing the same thing or thinking about it in slightly the same way? And this does not mean you have to answer questions by using simply homework problems. I'm going to be adapting those to see if you can make the connections between the experimental design and the classwork. One of the ones that I always will use is the problem, I think it's from chapter 4, how many flights of stairs would you actually have to run to expend all of the energy that is being released, if you ate a certain mass of a specific type of food, right? At the end of the day, that comes down to, if energy inside of the body comes in the shape of C6H12O6 plus O2. Something's going on here, folks. I don't know what it is. Okay, to give us CO2 plus H2O. And ultimately, the ability to move up and down the stairs is regulated by the presence of ATP, but we don't really know what ATP is yet. So I can't hold you accountable for that, but I can say, hey, if you looked at that homework problem and they can break down for you the amount of energy that's released when we break the bonds in between each of these elements that are being held together in this molecule that you know as glucose. Okay, well, that we can talk about, because remember, inside the Martian, he had to create what? He had to create water, which meant that he had to break down something, and that something may not have necessarily been glucose, but it was something that had carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? And that in the presence of oxygen, remember the materials he then combusted such that you would have the water that would then be able to grow his, in this case, potatoes. Potato. I don't know what's going on here. Something's going on with the processor in this computer. Okay, so that means we can when you're thinking about those homework problems, okay, and if you need to remember where they are, remember those were the sheets of paper I gave you that said, look, these are the specific homework problems you need to be able to address. It's always in the background of, how is that problem, or how is that homework problem? Even the basic, really simple, questions. How did that tie into the experimental design and or classwork and or say maybe the Martian or something like that? Okay, let's get rid of that. Let's move to this one. So, yeah, you're like, oh my God, how many questions are going to be on this thing? Well, there's probably only 3 or 4 sections of questions, right? But both the movie and the text will be used, and we're looking to connect the dots. So the storylines will be compared to that of the Hidden Figures. Okay, remember, primarily I'm interested in what's the computational differences. If the Martian is sometime in the future and Hidden Figures is the late 1950s, early 1960s, what has changed in our ability to compute and figure out something, say, like a trajectory? Okay. Now, sort of like COVID-19, okay, you would think that you should be able to think on your feet with some of these questions, and that's exactly what this test is all about. Okay, can you apply some of the real basic ideas so that you can actually answer the questions? And you'll see, if you think about what happened in The Martian, and you're thinking about, say, how we're solving problems now with what's happening with COVID-19 in your world, you never thought you'd be spending your spring semester in, lockdown or whatever they want to call this stuff these days, but we're going to use this for the rest of the semester along with The Martian to figure out, what is life, and then, why do these things actually occur? Okay, so this is the introduction. I want you guys to be able to have this for tomorrow morning when you're sitting there inside your pajamas, hopefully. Maybe you're listening to it on your cell phone. Maybe you're watching it on a computer. I'm here. Shoot me an email message. It's the easiest way to reach me at this point in time. I'm going to be having office hours. I've figured out how to use some of those technologies like WebEx and Zoom and things like that. But one thing that they don't support is they don't support large numbers of students all at the same time. So I'm going to have to unfortunately regulate my time more than I have in the past. Okay, but we will figure this out. Okay, so I'm going to load this thing up onto YouTube, and I'm going to make it available to you guys, and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay? Be safe.